All right, good evening, everybody. Tonight we're talking with Kaytie Johnson, and Kaytie has been a college, university, gallery curator in that vein for, I don't know, we'll find out how long. But I find it, like an interesting and specialized kind of, I think any kind of curating is kind of specialized, and there's different kinds of agendas involved. So Kaytie, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we hope it's our pleasure. So, where did you grow up?
Well, I'm from San Francisco originally, but I grew up in Phoenix, so I'm a desert girl.
And when did you think you were going to spend a life in the art world? When did that dawn on you that it was likely?
Oh my God. That's a good question. I'm not quite sure. I think maybe when I made the decision to go back to grad school after being in the world after my undergraduate degree for 7 years, when I made that decision to go back to grad school.
So you didn't grow up as an artist? I'm thinking you were going to be...
I began as an artist. I was a visual artist.
And what kind of degree did you get in college?
Both of my degrees, my undergraduate and graduate degrees, are all in art history.
And, all right, so you weren't a studio artist when you were in college. At that point, you'd given up being an artist. But you were still... Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think I decided at one point that my work was mediocre at best as a visual artist, and I had always been a writer. And I took my first art history class and fell in love, so I went to the other side, so to speak.
I did that. What was your undergraduate? Who did you study? What period of art did you focus on in college?
Ancient Mexican art.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So are you a specialist on when the world is ending on the Mayan calendar? Okay, good.
Yeah,
You're not too worried.
I think a lot of people got a lot of the facts wrong and about the Popol Vuh and things like that. But anyway, yeah.
Oh, I feel better already. Okay, we can keep talking. And then, so wait, you were out of the art world? There was some time between college and graduate school.
Yeah, after I graduated from college, I moved up to Seattle, right when the whole grunge thing was happening. It was a great time. I wasn't out of the art world because I had an art gallery there while I was there, and I also worked as a chef. So I still had a foot in the art world at all times. I always have.
And then you went back to get a graduate degree.
Yes.
And did you stay in the Northwest to do that?
No, I went back to Phoenix, and I went back. Both of my degrees are from Arizona State University. So I went back. You say Northwest,
you said Seattle, right? That's a whole lot more humid than Phoenix.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so what was your graduate degree?
My graduate degree was also art history, but my focus it began with modern Mexican art, but then it progressed. I began doing a lot of research about the U.S.-Mexico border and artistic production that takes place in and around the border. My master's thesis was about black velvet paintings.
Far out, okay.
Yeah.
With a Mexican emphasis?
Yeah, with a real strong theoretical emphasis too. But by the end of my grad school career, I was very much contemporary, both feet in the contemporary art world. So I don't know, the black velvet topic seemed really interesting to me for many reasons, but I guess because I like to push the envelope, I also wanted to see those art historians squirm a little bit when I told them the topic. Yeah, they weren't.
That worked, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, I would think. And all right, so then you got out of school the second time, and what happened?
Well, actually, even before I was in grad school, I was working in museums. I was at the Arizona State University Art Museum before I was in grad school. So I was working in museums the entire time I was in grad school. Then about right as I entered graduate school, I joined the curatorial staff at the Phoenix Art Museum. So I was working the whole time I was working on my graduate degree.
And all right, so all these different work experiences, were you getting paid?
Yeah.
Far out. And how many, was this the norm of people in your program?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Was that the norm? Were the other people who were in the graduate art program, were they also employed in the arts?
Not at the level that I was at. I was a curator. So
Yeah.
a lot of them were interns and things like that. But I would say maybe half were working in the arts in some way.
So after school, did you stay in Phoenix and continue to work as a curator at the museum?
I did.
And all right, so then how long did that last?
That lasted about 2 years. I couldn't wait to get out of Phoenix because I was kind of done with, I really don't like working for large public museums. And I was dying to get out, and then a job opportunity presented itself in, of all places, Indiana, and I took it.
All right, so let's talk about the public museums for a while. And what does, I mean, we've met with Dan Cameron, who's a public museum curator, and what he does, and what did you like and what did you dislike about that arena?
One of the things that I grew to dislike, and I don't know if this is true of all public institutions, but to an extent it was of the Phoenix Art Museum when I was there at the time, they were more focused on drawing an audience. So they were doing a lot of blockbuster exhibitions that had little to no research involved or any kind of academic bent. So I was tired of these, I felt that they were dumbing themselves down in order to get an audience. And that really upset me because I think that there needs to be scholarship and research done. And they had a fantastic collection, but they really weren't digging deep into it and presenting it in really new and interesting ways. So it was just bored. I was bored.
So where you stand on the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles and Jeffrey Deitch's attitude is pretty clear.
Gosh, I don't know if I really want to comment on that.
Okay, we don't have to. I think you already did.
Okay, well, let me just say when he was hired, I was shocked.
There you go. Fair enough.
I was shocked. And I think that things that have unfolded since Paul Schimmel left have been very interesting, to say the least. So I've been following them very closely.
Yeah, I would think. And Paul Schimmel is a hell of a curator.
Yes,
so did you see the curatorial staff there being involved in fundraising?
To a certain extent, I think that curators a lot of the time are involved in more subtle ways. It's not glad-handing and asking for money. Curators usually are involved in more subtle ways. Having conversations with donors, getting them interested in the museum or in the institution and trying to draw them in that way. But they are, they're part of that process, but not in a super direct way. I would. All
right, so when you left there, you went to where in Indiana?
God. I was at the Richard E. Peeler Art Center at DePauw, with the W, University, in a very small town in Indiana.
But you had a nice program there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have to say, I started it, so yes, I think that it was a great program. And I was hesitant about going because of the location. I'd never been to the Midwest before. And I'd never lived in a small town before, but I had the opportunity to create a program and build a program from the ground up in a brand new, beautiful building with fabulous galleries. And I love a challenge, so that's why I took it.
And now you're working at a different school?
Yes. Now I'm at Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia.
All right, so now when you were at DePauw, that's a small liberal arts school, right? It's not an art school.
It's a liberal arts college, yes.
All right, and how would you define to us what your job was integrating with a liberal arts school?
Well, I loved it because my interests as a curator go far beyond visual arts, and that's why I thought it was great working in a liberal arts college because I could collaborate with faculty members from all across the disciplines. And a lot of the programming that I did related a lot to a wide range of disciplines in teaching. As opposed to where I am now at an art design school, I don't have those resources to draw upon, and that's one thing that I miss, I have to say, is not having that really wide range of perspectives.
Do you feel like in both these situations you're curating, is your audience the student body predominantly?
When I was at DePauw, it was, but I think I would say probably 70% of our audience is a non-Moore audience. It's always a real challenge to get students into the gallery. Always, across the board, at every institution I worked at that's affiliated with an academic institution, it's really difficult to get students into the galleries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, when you did exhibit, how long were you at DePauw? Was that 3 years or was it more?
Oh my God, I can't believe 9 years.
So it was about 3 plus a little. And how long would the shows be up?
Well, I mean, it ranged. I don't know, because for larger, more complex group exhibitions, they'd be up for a little bit longer. I'd say maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And if it was a solo show, maybe 5 weeks. And then for student shows and faculty shows, it was about the same, about 4 or 5 weeks. So it kind of ranged.
Interesting, because I feel like I should double check this. But I just saw a show at Marquette University in Milwaukee that I think is up for the entire school year. And I could see that the show is a show that everybody at the school should ultimately see. And maybe that's why they left it up longer. Do you think there's a relation?
It might be budget. The longer
oh, sure, that could be part of it.
Yeah.
But do you think there's a relationship between how long a show is up and how much of the student body sees it?
No, I think that you could have a show up for a year and students wouldn't come downstairs to the galleries to take a look at it. I mean, I finally developed strategies. I think that, and I have found the most effective way to get students into the galleries is to work directly with faculty. And they
bring them in by holding their hand? Like kindergartners?
Yeah, dragging them in or whatever. But I mean, if you work with faculty directly and you let them know well in advance what you're working on and how it would tie into their teaching, it works. It really does. And once you get the students into the gallery, when they get into the habit and practice of seeing shows and going to openings, they generally come back. It's just really difficult to get them in there in the first place.
Can you think, this is a hard question, can you think about shows you were involved in Phoenix, shows you were involved in Indiana, and shows that you're involved with at Moore that the other institutions would or would not do, and why? I'm trying to focus on you as a curator, and you can answer the question more directly. I'm trying to focus on you as a curator and your role and how it's different in these three different environments.
So I would say, well, I mean, I don't know how to answer that. I think that there are, I'd say maybe 70% of the shows that I've done at academic institutions probably would not have been shown at the large public institution because, I don't want to say it. I think that they were a little bit maybe too scholarly, maybe a little bit too pushing the envelope. Maybe they didn't appeal to a broad enough audience for a large public institution, I think. Do you want examples of shows or just in general?
I was just in general. I mean, you could give examples, but maybe even reference people we don't know, but you could name some if you want.
I did a show at DePauw called Skirting the Line, Conceptual Drawing. It was a drawing show that had no drawings in it. And I know I could not have done that at the Phoenix Art Museum because, I mean, trust me, it was difficult enough to try to get faculty and students to get it, to, you know, but I think it would have been
I missed the word when you said that it had no what in it?
no drawings. It was a show about conceptual drawing, and it had no drawings in it.
Okay, cool, I got it.
Not what we would traditionally consider to be a drawing.
Right. Interesting. Okay, now, when you were in Phoenix, what percentage of the shows traveled?
You know, it's funny because a lot of the shows, I would say like a really small percentage, because Phoenix Art Museum took a lot of traveling shows and brought them there that were originally.
That's okay, either way. I want to know both of those directions.
Oh, so either way, God. I mean, towards the end, I would say maybe 70% of the shows that they did were from other institutes. They were traveling shows that they were taking.
Clearly, it's much more economic to bring in a traveling show than to do a one-person show than to do a show that doesn't travel. And you can help defray the expenses by getting the show to travel, but the getting of it to travel can be a big effort also. And
it's a huge effort. Traveling a show is a huge, huge effort. Yeah.
Okay, so now let's take a look at more in DePauw. Do those shows travel? The shows come in, the shows go out.
Oh, at DePauw, I took, you know, because I really believe, just because I'm a curator doesn't mean that it has to all be my voice and my perspective and my show. So I would invite curators to curate shows. I would take traveling shows. Although I think because of budget concerns, I wasn't able, I would say maybe, gosh, 60–70% were my shows and the rest were traveling shows, just because of budget constraints. But I think it actually turned out to be a good balance, I think.
At Moore, you're creating shows for, I mean, it's an artist-student body, right?
Yes.
Are you creating shows with them in mind? Is that a heavy influence on what you curate? Who do you play to? Who's your audience? How many different audiences do you have? How many shows do you do that appeal to more than, you know what I mean? Those things.
Right, right. Of course, the educational mission, the teaching mission of the college is in mind when I'm organizing shows. That's just one aspect of it, and I think of the students, I think of the faculty, but I also have to think about the non-Moore audience, which is our largest audience.
Right.
So, I mean, there's just a lot of different, you know, things to think about when I'm programming the exhibition schedule. But I don't think that I am not, I don't sit there and think, oh my God, you know, I've got to do the show because students would love it. I mean, that's a great thing, but you know, our biggest chunk of our audience is not the college audience, so that's really important too.
Do you play off of other schools in Philadelphia? Do you do things in conjunction? Do you both do something on innocent art or naive art at the same time, or do you cooperate, or are you in a vacuum, or both?
No, I mean, it's both. I love collaborating. I'm a huge collaborator, and I've only been at Moore for a little over a year, so I'm trying to establish these connections and partnerships. Some institutions and organizations there want to play, some don't want to play, you know, but I think it's great because the key players in the visual art scene in Philadelphia, we all have a really distinct voice and role to play, which I think has got a really great balance. We're not stepping on each other's toes in many ways. So there are a few institutions that I'm working with right now on projects in the future, and I would like to have more collaborative relationships. But like I said, some are a little resistant to that and aren't interested.
How is your role different in Moore than it was at DePauw? What's your job? You know, what you do.
Well, one thing that I actually I love is I don't have to take care of a collection anymore. Moore is a non-collecting institution. So, I mean, it's great. It was great at DePauw to have that collection to pull upon, you know, and like budget crunches or when you needed something on the cheap, and you could like do something with that. But again, I really want to focus on curating artists and exhibitions and not taking care of a collection. I mean, that's, you know, that's old school. curating. That's the old school definition of curating. So it feels really liberating to not have that anymore. That's like the primary thing. But I think very similar, what I'm doing it more is very similar to what I did at DePauw, spans the collection.
Do you do reprises of different shows that you've done? You know, that show that I did at DePauw was really wonderful. I think I can call up 80% of the people and get 20% new blood and have a great show here in Philadelphia. Do we do that one?
I don't like repeats.
That's respectable.
You mean the biennial? Or which show are you talking about?
I was just talking in general. I'm just wondering if, you know, I mean, one of my assumptions is that most curators move around frequently, and it's a good strategy for artists to befriend them because they can get a new exhibit every 3 years with a museum.
It's funny that you say that, because I was just talking to a curator friend of mine the other day, and I was talking about how I'll include, I mean, maybe a few times I've included the same artist in a few different shows, but I won't work. There are some curators who tend to work with, there are certain artists that they tend to work with over and over and over again over the years. I'm not like that. I think I like to keep changing it up and keeping it fresh. And I have really long ongoing relationships with artists, and I'll include them, but I don't think I'll ever give a solo show to an artist twice. I'll include them in a group show and put their work in other contexts, but I don't think I would ever do a solo, show by an artist twice.
You try to stay current or on top of what's going on in the contemporary art world, right?
The contemporary art world is one thing that influences what I do, yeah.
Uh-oh, what are the others?
Oh my God, film.
Yeah.
Music. You know, I mean, it could be books, something that I'm reading. It could be just about anything.
All right, let's go back to visual artists and ask the questions that's on the tip of everybody's tongue. How do artists get on your radar? How do you find people?
You know, it's because I go and I look at a lot of art, not just in museums and galleries, but I do go to art fairs just because it's all there in one place, and I don't have to travel as much as I used to all these different places. That's one way. You know, actually, I found that one of the most unexpected ways, but one of the ways that I discovered led me to some really great artists is doing a studio visit with an artist that I really liked, and they said, hey, you really should go do a studio visit, or you should meet with this artist, because they already know me well enough at that point, so that and I know they're not going to steer me wrong. So that's actually been a really good way that I have found other artists.
I think you do that more overtly than other curators I've worked with, and I know that you've done that because of when we've worked together. You know, you're always asking, what are you seeing that's interesting? What are you seeing that I should see? You know, and you have an agenda of things you want to see, but you've left time to take up, you know, or to see something else. So it's a bit, I get what I'm hearing is that it's an extension of existing relationships where there's trust and you're asking people to pay it forward.
Yeah, because I like to pay it forward too, you know, and I recommend artists to curator colleagues of mine all the time. I think that it is, you know, it just works. It just works that way because we all know, because I know they're not going to steer me wrong, and I have lots and lots of artists contacting me all the time to look at their work. But anyway, that's a different topic.
Okay. Do you? Oh, where was I going to go? What are you working on now? Are you curating some? You have shows in the pipeline.
I've got shows like through 2014 in the pipeline. I'm working on about 7 different things at the same time. I mean, the most immediate thing is I'm bringing Nato Thompson's Living as Form show to Moore next spring, which I'm really excited about because there will be no art objects at all in the galleries. And I think that that's never really happened. All the exhibitions in the past at Moore have been very object-based. And I think it's kind of it's a really good palate cleanser, and it's also something I'm very interested in is archival documentation, the archive, socially engaged, projects, things like that. So social practice. So that's something I'm working on right now, is how to take that and translate it to fit into the galleries at more.
Sometimes I feel like curators keep coming up with more and more esoteric themes, around which to generate, like the mop in contemporary art, or and then then you see pictures of mops, and you see things that are about mops and things that wish they were mops. I just made this one up, but it's pretty good. Sweeping the country. How so what, when you're curating a show like many of these that you're working on, and a show where you're not just working with a single artist, how do you find you spend a bunch of time on the internet and you make a bunch of phone calls to other curators?
No, usually when I conceptualize the theme for a group exhibition, it's kind of, the idea for it forms out of things that I've seen and things that I'm reading about and things that, that's how it generates, and it kind of starts there, that core idea, and I start finding these relationships between these works and these artists. That's kind of how it starts. And like you said, like the mop show, I'm not a curator who does thematic shows in that way. Like, let's do a show about mops. I mean, to me, I don't think I think that's kind of like a one note. I think it's easy. It's too easy. Let's complicate that somehow, No, but it's just like kind of sometimes very organically, these things start kind of congealing and coming together, and that forms the kind of mass for an idea for a show.
But that only gives you half the material, invariably.
Oh, right. But after that, then I do, because I'm always traveling and always looking at art, so I will find things, and and I do contact other curators and ask about this and that and see what would fit. But during my travels, I usually find other works that would fit into that. And just like my, that storage file in my head, I always have that. I always can rely upon that to generate ideas for other artists to include in shows.
Cool. Hey, you guys, I'm about ready to see what questions you have. I got one more here. This time around, they've thrown director into your title, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What does that add to what you do?
That's really it's difficult, because at DePauw I was also director and curator, and now I'm director and chief curator. That's the part I don't really like as much. But because there's the administrative part, and then there's the creative oversight part, which is the curator. And of course, like, I dream about, like, oh my God, wouldn't it be fantastic to just be a curator again, and just that's all I do is focus on shows. But I think I would become really bored. Actually, I kind of like doing both, although of course there are administrative things that I can't stand. But yeah.
There are very few, I don't know. There are most people who don't like being the department chair, which is sort of like what you become.
Oh God, yeah. I would not want to be a department chair. That's a whole different story. But yeah, I mean, I sometimes fantasize about just being a curator again, but of course there's no going back at this point. It's like I just couldn't do it. I think I would become bored. I need to have, like, all the balls in the air at the same time, the way I do now.
As director, do you have to raise money, or is all the money you have coming from the school?
No, I have to raise money, and I always work in tandem with the development office at DePauw and at Moore, both institutions. So we just work together on, I tell them about what projects I'm working on, ideas I have for potential funders, and we just, like, think about that and then work together to do the grant writing, to do, the asking, all that stuff. But
cool. All right, hold on. Yeah. All right. Chalda, your hand is up, I'm assuming, from before. If it's not, leave it up. I'll get back to you. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, Kaytie, I was curious how far and wide, or by what means, DePauw and more searched for someone to fill the position, and how you heard about both positions.
I would say, I mean, I don't know because I wasn't on the search committee, but I would assume that they were both national searches. I know for a fact they were national. I don't know if they were internationally listed. I found out there are a few places that curators go to usually look for positions. It's the AAM. Used to be called the American Association of Museums. Now it's the American
Alliance?
Yes, it's the Alliance.
I was going to pull out my card. Yeah.
That's a really good resource for looking at, I would check those all the time. And there are a few other sources, but that's kind of like the prime one. And of course, CAA would have some listed, usually the same, but AAM always had a lot more.
And were you yourself actively searching and you just happened to come across these postings, or how did that work? Did someone alert you to the openings?
It's, even if I'm not looking, I look, because the positions, because curators move around a lot, and it's really fascinating to me because it keeps me abreast of like what's going on in the world. Like, okay, oh, they left, this curator left. Can you?
We're still here.
Yeah, I just pulled up a visa from the American Alliance.
Okay, you freaked me out.
That's my job.
No, but I'm always looking, and the particular times that I found these listings that were open, I was actually looking for a position. But I'm always looking to see what's out there, who's going where, what's open. I think it's really interesting, and it's a good thing to keep up with, too.
All right, great, thanks.
So, Mark, I don't know if you're looking for a job in this field or not, but you can, I'm a member, but I didn't have to put in any membership stuff to get this. I just typed Viso, which is the name of this online magazine that lists job availabilities. But, a lot of these things are like a preparator at the Dead Animal Museum or whatever,
But it's great, but you can, like, narrow your search down. So, yeah.
So I just did a search for a Viso and museum, and this was like the second or third listing if you wanted to find out. And some of these things you can calculate how much various people are getting paid in their positions. And I'm jealous of some people.
Yeah, but I would say that this is like a great, great resource, especially for curators. Curators look a lot at this site, especially curators in the U.S.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay. All right, Mark, thank you. Mika, go ahead.
Kaytie, sorry, my ears perked up big when you mentioned Black Velvet, because I love Black Velvet, and I used to go to that Black Velvet Museum in Portland, and I wondered if you knew if Karen Johnson ever landed anywhere after closing that. Do you know about it?
I know about it, but I'm kind of out of touch with the Black Velvet world. Once in a while I still get inquiries. People ask, could I get a copy of your thesis and that sort of thing. But no, I don't know. I'm sorry. I wish I did, but I don't know what happened.
It's wide open for you, Mika.
Oh yeah. Well, people look at that medium like it's a joke, but did you go to that museum?
No, I never went, but I knew about it.
There were really beautiful paintings there, and it's not easy to paint on that.
No, it's incredibly difficult to paint on Black Velvet.
Wait, is it harder than burlap?
Well, there's no going back if you miss your chance to leave a piece, like the material black. Everything that's black has to stay the material. So if you screw up, you can't go back.
I think it's more difficult than burlap, Paul.
Well, Duchamp did okay at the burlap. I'm sure you're right. We're getting kind of off course here. Merv, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you, Kaytie. This has been really informative. I've lived in the areas where you have curated and been employed, and that's quite different, Indiana to Phoenix. I was living in Tucson then, and then I grew up around Philadephia, so I know more. And I actually have two questions. One, I'm living in Billings, Montana now, and I just want to run this by you and maybe get some feedback from you. We, a couple of years ago, it was arranged for Polly Apfelbaum to come out here and to do a show, which is a really big deal for the Yellowstone Art Museum because it's not a real big one, and you're probably aware of that. And she didn't exhibit what she had been known for doing, which was at that time, dyeing small pieces of material and then laying them out on the floor or the wall or making sculpture in a sense. She laid out long rolls of beautiful material that she had picked up in LA actually that were shimmering, and then she adjusted the light in the room so that as you walked around these pieces you would have some sense, well, a different experience. Well, the people around here and the people on the board got so upset that the curator actually was fired on the spot. And I think that is really unusual. And that to me, that's unheard of. I don't know, but I had never heard of that before. So then I researched it, and I didn't find anything on that. I saw some mention of it. And the only other one that I had read about was in Berkeley, and he wasn't fired on the spot, and it was because he was trying to bring in some really challenging material. So it was a slightly different situation. But that isn't very common, is it? I mean, they had the show, and then we hear about it on TV that he's fired. And he had a good rapport with the artist in town, which is not
Thankfully, that doesn't happen very often. I think it's really problematic because that, to me, sometimes conveys that the board has a little bit too much power over what happens in the institution. I mean, if you look at, dare I say it, MoCA in LA right now, I think that's another example. I mean, that has a lot to do with power. I mean, it's a shame that happened because curators, I believe, are not just project managers. I think that curators also need to, as a curator, like one of my greatest things, I love to give artists the opportunity to realize new work. And especially if it's a departure from whatever they've done before, that's great, right? But I mean, it's almost, it's a shame. It's really horrible, and thankfully it's rare, I would say.
I'm looking up Dennis Barrie, B-A-R-R-I-E, who was the curator at the Cincinnati Art Museum, who did a Robert Mapplethorpe show. And Barrie said the right things, is my recollection. He wasn't fired though, right? He sort of resigned sometime later after.
Yeah, after being exhausted by all the lawsuits. I wonder if he's still in Las Vegas. He's working at like the law enforcement museum in Las Vegas last time I talked to him, I think.
I thought he was involved. I thought he went to work for this company outside Seattle that came up with for-profit theme museums. I thought one of them was the Spy Museum. I thought he was. I don't
know. Could be.
I mean, it sounded like doing that high-level curatorial, laudatory sort of stuff hurt him. Mer, did you have another question?
I did, and thanks for giving me some direction because I wasn't getting very much information about what was, happening, and I thought it was great for this community to have their ideas or concepts of what art is, to have that expanded. So I've, well, anyway, the other question I have is, what influence can an artist or artist community have on, and I'm going to use this one as the example again because this is where we're living, on the kind of shows? Can we have any influence at all on maybe, I don't know how to phrase this, direction, or, you know, I'm kind of tired of seeing the collections that they have already, and I know I sound pretty critical, but well, I think museums have an obligation to their community. And so is there any way that artists in this community, or let's say the whole Montana community,
you know, it's a really good question, and it's kind of a, I mean, it's you know, it ranges, because some institutions are really willing and really like working with artists who are based in the area. I tend not to use the word local. I don't like to use the word local as in local artists. I think can be kind of perceived in a pejorative way. Some institutions are really interested in it, some aren't. You know, you have to find an institution and or a director or curator who is amenable to that. You know, sometimes with larger institutions, I don't know what this institutions in Billings is like, but if it's large, you know, the only way that artists could have influence is to sit on the, you know, exhibitions committee, or to sit on the board or something like that, because, or to get the curator's ear, or to form some sort of contemporary art support, not support group, that's a horrible word, not like self-help, but group that is, you know, loves contemporary art. It's kind of a, I don't know, it's hard to distill it down and give you a really cut and dry, easy answer. You know what I find too, Philadelphia has a really long, strong, rich history of independent artist-run artist spaces. And I have found that, not just in Philadelphia, but in Philadelphia in this case, what these independent spaces have done have actually influenced what the larger, more mainstream institutions are doing. So in a way, what artists are doing in that area is actually impacting what the mainstream museums are becoming interested in and what they're showing and who they show. I've seen that happen. It's just a really, it's such a hard thing to respond to. I don't know if that helps at all.
I think those are good answers and good information. Let me take it in a slightly different direction. I think that you could create an artist group of people. I think you need to have over 8, and you know, and have some genuine content to contribute to the direction of the museum. And because you have numbers, ask for a meeting with the director and say, this is what we'd like to see happen. We'd like to be involved in facilitating this happening. Maybe you'd like to create a committee that we'd be on, or maybe you'd like to add us to a committee, or maybe we should go get more people and come demonstrate in front of your building. You know, and I think that with the idea of sincerely augmenting that, you can do that. I think that museums move mostly really at a glacial speed. You know, things do not happen very quickly at all. You could also, I think it'd be interesting to listen to the webinar we did with Patrick, without a K, McCoy, M-C-C-O-Y. And Patrick is a avid collector who was under the impression that it's collectors who have the most power in terms of determining what museums do and where they go. So he has created a group of like-minded collectors who are not affiliated with any museum, who then go around trying to take their agenda and their interests to museums. And, you know, in theory, I mean, Patrick owns 1,200 works of art, and many other people in the collection have similarly large numbers of pieces. And, you know, they're trying to negotiate and get museums to acknowledge them because they feel like they have a power base. I think, you know, I think you need to, I mean, one thing is to have a good idea. Another thing is to have a good idea with a power base that says, you know, with our support, you will be better than without it. And listen to what we think in terms of direction. you know, that's sort of my notion on that one. Mur, I want to move on, but
Okay.
are we good there?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Linda, go ahead.
Hi, Katie. I had a question about your relationship with commercial galleries, let's say like in New York. What is the relationship between a college gallery and commercial galleries? And do you accept proposals from artists that might kind of inspire shows for you?
Cool.
The relationship between the Moore galleries and commercial galleries, was that the first part of your question? Was it a two-part?
Yeah, that was. I muted Linda just so we don't have the echo.
The relationship, I mean, honestly, I don't have like super close relationships with particular galleries. My relationships with galleries intensify when I'm doing shows that include artists that they represent. That's kind of, there's no, I would say that's kind of the extent of the relationship. I don't really, it doesn't really go beyond that. There's not one particular gallery that I work with a lot, and I show a lot of their artists. You know, I think that that's kind of nepotism a little bit, but that's how I would answer that. And also, artists, you know, I get unsolicited proposals and packages from artists all the time about shows and things like that. And, you know, it just depends. I can't say how often I respond to those or how often they, I mean, not, I would say not very often do they turn into a show.
What format are these proposals from artists coming?
Usually it's like a package of information. I mean, well, it used to be more, now it's more web-based. It's all like through, or, you know, through email and things like that. But usually it's not, I mean, if it's an idea, if they propose showing their work, it's usually that. It's usually not a group, it's not usually not an artist proposing a group exhibition that they've organized as a curator. I appreciate it when artists, when artists do their research first, and when they look at the history of the shows that I have done and the sort of things that the institution where I'm working at has done to get a really good sense of it's a good fit. Because I get a lot of artists contacting me, unfortunately, where it's not a good fit, and it turns into kind of a uncomfortable interaction. But I don't know. I mean, I respond to every proposal, every contact I get, whether it turns into a studio visit or whether it's, you know, it doesn't. I mean, I respond to every single one.
A really important thing Katie said was do your research. I hated it. I mean, when I had a gallery, mostly I only showed abstraction. And when people would send me, you know, figurative work, it meant to me that they hadn't done their homework. And when I got a group email that said, dear favorite art dealer, and then I could see that they'd also copied like 300 other art dealers, you know, I mean, that was really rude and inefficient on their part, and invariably doesn't work, you know. And if the person first says to me, here I am, I'm wonderful, do me, I'm not very much interested, you know. And if somebody instead says, you know, the program, the shows you've curated have been really fabulous, I've wondered if you've thought about this facet, and maybe if you wanted to show me with so-and-so and so-and-so, it would augment what you were already doing in a nice direction. You know, that's much more putting me into the right frame of mind to say something
exactly.
positive.
And I think you'll get a better response from a curator if you approach it in that way. I mean, I do my homework when I contact, you know, other institutions or whoever. I think that it's just, it just makes more sense, and I'm more likely to respond in a positive way. And even, yeah, I agree with you completely, Paul.
Cool. Linda, did you want to say more?
Oh, no, that was good. Thank
okay,
you.
cool. You're welcome. Thank you, too. Okay, Lynn.
Hi. I have a quick question. I was wondering, when you're looking at art, what kind of balance are you looking for in terms of aesthetics, or in terms of concept and aesthetics and the technical quality of the art?
That's an interesting question.
I don't know how to gosh, it's going to be a hard one to respond to. You know, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's not like I go into a studio visit looking for one particular thing. I think it's important that an artist really know how to speak well about their work, to really articulate what they're doing without like dropping a lot of theoretical kind of terms and concepts. I don't know if I can answer that, Lynn. I really think it's a matter of just, honestly, I usually go into a studio visit doing a lot of listening in the beginning, a lot of listening, and then I ask questions. But I think that the more articulate an artist can be about the conceptual and formal aspects of their work, the more, you know, and the things that get me interested and want to make me ask questions, the more interested I am. But I don't think that there's like a formula. I don't think that exists.
I think that's a pretty good answer. Hold on. Lynn, why are you asking? What do you want to know? What do you really want to know?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, probably all of us have gone into exhibits where maybe there's a strong concept, but the work itself looks void.
Not awful.
Yeah, and then, you know, there are other things that are purely decorative, and or maybe they're beautiful, but the concept doesn't quite go with it. And I was wondering how you react to those things, and if you have an answer to that for yourself.
Well, I hope I understood you correctly. I'm getting a little delay from the. But when you were referencing me, you said if the work's more decorative, but it's not. I mean, I don't mind if work is decorative as long as the artist can explain, you know, give me some context. I don't know. I don't know if I can. It's impossible to answer. I'm sorry. I just can't answer that. I wish I could.
Let me ask you some.
Case by case basis. It's just, you know, I can't.
Let me ask you two questions that Lynn's questions make me wonder about. And one of my pet peeves is curators who I think force artists into roles that their art into a role that it doesn't necessarily want to be wearing, and then put that person's art into an exhibit where it's the curator that's trying to express their point of view. You know, I mean, I feel like more the role of a curator isn't to say, I'm putting this show together that proves George Washington was a good guy. I think it's better to put a show together that says, this is a show about George Washington and the different hats and roles that he wore. You know, that, and when I see a show that I feel like the curation is heavy-handed, it annoys me. And from my familiarity with what you do, we're on the same page.
Yeah, because I believe exhibitions should pose more questions. They should not answer questions. They should raise questions. They're not there to be authoritative, at least in my perspective. I know there are other curators out there who this is God's law and this is the way that it is, and there's no room for questioning. And I also do not like curators who almost try to shape an artist's direction or career or try to change their work for a particular purpose. I have 4 curators like that. And that's definitely not something that I would ever participate in.
All right, so then there are those artists who are doing what I would consider sloppy artwork intentionally, who may have a better hand than they are using. And Franz West comes to mind immediately, and he died recently, so I don't want to. I'll let you say something instead of me. No, and then I've got a friend who refers to this kind of art as feebleism, and there's a very highly respected curator who said he was in favor of this because he thought it made the art more accessible to a larger audience. And I don't feel that. And so where do you fall on this?
I mean, if you're going to be sloppy, be intentionally sloppy, like convince me, like why is it, and be really good at being sloppy.
Okay.
You know, I think because there's nothing wrong with like being a fan of craft and workmanship. You can still, I mean, look at Jessica Stockholder. You can still have some sort of like non-control, but be totally in control of that kind of potential borderline sloppiness.
Jessica's a good example. Basquiat comes to mind for me.
Basquiat, but no, there are a lot of, you know, I like to do a lot of studio visits with young artists, especially who are in MFA programs here, just to see what they're doing, and because I do show the work of young artists in Philadelphia at Moore, and you know, there's a lot coming out. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's just this time, but a lot of like really intentionally sloppy, yeah, stuff. And I honestly, I have no time for it, especially if it's just, you know, young hipster kind of stuff with nothing behind it. I can't be bothered, and those studio visits are usually very short.
My wife Amy refers to those as dorm art, but I think feebleism is a good. I like that movement's name better.
Yeah, it's almost like doing a studio visit with, I don't know, someone who designed the Urban Outfitters catalog or something. It's like this kind of like hipster, sloppy, ugly kind of a thing that I just, have no patience for.
Yeah, more names are coming to mind, but I guess we'd be naming them in a pejorative sense. But I'm willing. All right. Does anybody else have a question? Or should we end it on that note? Who hasn't spoken today? Who hasn't? Kevin, I haven't heard from you. Kevin, what's on your mind?
Well, I was interested in your comments about feebleism.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if, and I'm blanking on the fellow, the Belgian artist who, Toymans.
Okay.
Would you put him in that category?
Oh God, I'd make him the president of feebleism. Okay. God, you know, the man. I'm sorry, he doesn't know how to paint. He should learn. You know, but maybe there are people who know better than him and don't do it either. But I'm not convinced he knows. But yeah, Luke Toymans. Katie, did you want to defend Luke Toymans?
I don't know. I'm not like, I don't want to make him the president, but he could be a member.
Of the I Am a Sloppy Dude Club?
But he doesn't annoy me. I don't go strongly as you do in that direction with him.
He does, but and then Karen Klimnik is one that just yeah. So those things bother me. Okay, cool. And we got some more comments here. This is good. All right, let's go to Carol. Your turn, Carol.
Hi. What I was thinking about and wondered about is that a lot of they're like now starting up curatorial programs that are like 2-year programs, and they're not necessarily art history based, but more theory based. And part of me feels really skeptical about that, and whether, like, out of art history makes sense to me. Out of theory doesn't make as much sense to me, because then I think you get the theory-driven shows. So wondering how both of you feel about that, or about those programs.
You know,
I'm going to go first. I agree with you. I want to say first, I'm going to go first. I agree with Carol. Your turn.
You know, no, I agree, but one thing, Moore has the first and only undergraduate curatorial studies program in the country, and there's a reason why it's the only one. Because I believe you can't major in curatorial studies. You have to have a base in something. I don't care if it's art history, if it's English literature, if it's film studies, if it's something. You've got to come in to curating with some base, some knowledge outside of that, because otherwise you get this huge amount, and there's lots and lots of young curators like that right now that you can tell went to curatorial studies programs who don't have that solid base. to build upon, because there's nothing there to inform their curatorial practice other than what they're taught in this program. So I'm not a big fan of them, and I especially am skeptical, I have to say, of the undergraduate curatorial studies program at Moore. I just don't see how it can work.
I think it applies also to artists who are in heavily theory-based art courses, and as opposed to having life experiences. I'm much more a proponent of tapping into yourself as opposed to being a proponent of somebody else's theory. I just think that's sort of like, eh.
But usually you can tell an artist who spouts a lot of theory, usually it's fresh out of school, usually fresh out of grad school. And I think the more distance they get and the more time they spend in the world away from graduate school, the less that you find those little theoryisms in their when they're speaking about their work. So fortunately, I mean, I love theory, but
yeah, I mean, it's useful.
There needs to be balance.
Yeah.
I'm all about balance and everything.
Okay. Mark, did you have another question or no? I guess that was it. You took your hand down. Murr's hand is still up, but I'm guessing Murr's done. All right, Mark, go ahead.
I just wanted to have you remind the class that Rita is in a group show on Friday, right, Rita?
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that you were asking me to do that. That's nice. So,
okay. That's
at the Bridgeport Arts Center. Yay, plug for Rita. Okay. Does anybody else want to say anything? Mur, did you want to say something more?
I going all over the screen looking to lower my hand. Sorry.
Oh. Well, yeah, I guess you figured it out.
I guess I did.
Katie, I have one final question. Are you teaching?
You know, I'm not teaching at DePauw. I was a member of the faculty, but I'm not at Moore, although I work really closely, especially with the seniors during their final year, so it is a lot like teaching, although I don't have faculty rank.
No, but I mean, I was wondering if you were engaged in a class. When you're working with those seniors, that's not a class per se as much as it's individual study, right?
No, I mean, it's not even individual study. It's just like I just work so closely with them, doing a lot of studio visits and a lot of like one-on-one meetings and things like that. That, well, at least for a lot of students tell me, it's like I learned more from you during this semester that I spent talking to you than I did during my 4 years. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm not their professor. They tend to listen to people who are not their professors more than they do their professors. Yeah, but I'm not teaching classes.
Got it. And are all the shows you've done at these two schools of living artists?
You know, I think I've included some artists who are no longer living in shows, but I've never done a solo show of an artist who is not living. The first artist that comes to mind, I mean, Mark Lombardi did a show, I think that right after he died, that he was included in, but I can't think of, yeah. Primarily living artists, that's what I love. I love to work with living artists. I love to, like, that's my thing.
Cool. All right. I appreciate you being with us tonight. You've shed a lot of light on, you know, what you do, how you go about doing it, and the integrity that you bring to it. Those are all important things. I'm unmuting everybody so we can all clap together, but I thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
You guys, let me stop the recording.
Fun.